All right, welcome back to the deep dive. So today, we're opening up a file that, honestly, I think a lot of us think we know the story of.
Oh, it's so much deeper. I mean, this is really the definitive story of the American economy for, what, a 30-year span?
It really is. It has everything. You've got massive ambition, you've got this incredible growth story, but then systemic corruption and a collapse so huge, it almost took the entire world down with it.
It's the whole package.
We are, of course, talking about Countrywide Financial. And to kick things off, I want to just throw a number at you. I found this researching the episode, and I had to, read it 3 times because I thought it was a typo.
I think I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah.
And it is staggering every single time.
Okay, so if you invested in Countrywide stock in 1982, and you just held on to it until 2003, what do you think that return was?
It sounds like something from, the dot-com bubble or the crypto craze. But this was a mortgage company, a boring mortgage company.
23,000%.
There it is.
23,000%. I mean, that beat Walmart during its rocket ship growth phase. It beat Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway. Fortune magazine literally called it the 23,000% stock.
It was an absolute machine. For 2 decades, it wasn't just, a successful company. It was a money printing operation.
Yeah.
And you have to understand that context, that high point, to really get how catastrophic the fall was.
Right.
Because by 2006, at their peak, Countrywide wasn't just a lender. They were the lender. They were financing 1 out of every 5 mortgages in the United States.
Stop and think about that. 1 in 5. You drive down any suburban street in America in, say, 2006. And every 5th house you pass was financed by these guys, by Angelo Mozilo.
Exactly. The value of the loans on their books was something like 3.5% of the entire U.S. GDP.
That's insane.
No single lender had ever had that kind of power over the American housing market.
And yet today, I mean, the name Countrywide, there's basically a swear word in finance. It's just synonymous with toxic, with fraud.
It went from this Wall Street darling to, facing bankruptcy rumors almost overnight. And then, of course, it was swallowed by Bank of America in a deal that...
Oh, we're going to get to the deal. Often called the single worst acquisition in banking history.
It's definitely in the running. So that's our mission today. We want to bridge that gap. How does a company go from a 23,000% return to being the absolute face of the financial crisis? We're going to unpack the business model, which is way more complex than just lending money.
Right.
We're going to get into the scandals, the infamous Friends of Angelo lists, and the just massive financial hangover that Bank of America inherited.
So let's rewind. Let's go back to the beginning. Where did this monster come from? It wasn't born a giant.
Not at all. It started, actually, very humbly, in 1969, founded by 2 guys, David Loeb and the man himself, Angelo Mozilo.
Mozilo, he's the main character in this whole tragedy. Even his name sounds like he's out of Scorsese film. You see the pictures, the permatan, the flashy suits.
He was a character, a larger-than-life, very aggressive, very, very ambitious guy. But in the beginning, Countrywide was, it was not a rocket ship. Their IPO, their initial public offering, was actually a flop.
Really?
Yeah, it was described as less than successful. The stock traded over the counter for pennies, less than $1 a share.
It was a penny stock, basically.
Essentially, yeah. It took them until the mid-'80s to really get their footing and get listed on the New York Stock Exchange. But once they hit their stride, they just perfectly rode this huge wave of baby boomers buying houses and interest rates going down for 20 years.
And just to set the stage for everyone listening, because corporate names change and brands are designed to make us forget, when you see Bank of America home loans today, that is Countrywide.
That's the shell.
Bank of America bought the chassis, right? They painted it red, slapped their logo on it. But the engine, the infrastructure, the DNA of that operation, that was the machine that Angelo built.
Precisely. And that machine was something special. I think, a lot of people have this misconception that a mortgage lender is like the bank for Mary Poppins.
Right. You put your tuppence in an account.
Yeah, and they lend that tuppence to your neighbor to buy a house, and they collect the interest. Simple. They hold the loan.
That's portfolio lending, right? They keep the loan on their own books.
Exactly. But that is not what Countrywide was at all. They were built on a totally different model called originate to distribute.
Okay.
They were a factory. Their job was to originate the loan, get you to sign the papers, and then almost immediately sell that loan on what's called the secondary market.
All right, secondary market. This is the key. This is the engine of the whole story, really. It sounds technical, but the concept is, it's actually pretty simple.
Think of it like a conveyor belt. You, the home buyer, come to Countrywide. They give you the money. Now Countrywide is holding your IOU, your mortgage. They don't want to sit on that IOU for 30 years and collect your little payments
They want their cash back now.
right now, so they can go lend it to the next person in line. So what they do is they take your IOU, they bundle it with thousands of other IOUs,
And they create something called a mortgage-backed security, an MBS.
and then they sell that big bundle, that security, to big investors. We're talking pension funds, insurance companies, foreign governments, anybody with a ton of cash looking for a return.
So Countrywide is just the middleman. They're just connecting Wall Street money to Main Street home buyers and taking a fee for doing it.
That's the core of it, yeah.
Yeah.
But Angelo Mozilo was not content with just being a middleman. He wanted to capture every single dollar related to that transaction. And this brings us to their real genius and their real downfall: vertical integration.
Vertical integration. Okay, business school buzzword.
Yeah.
Usually means like Ford owning a rubber plantation for their tires. You own the whole supply chain.
That's exactly what it was here. They wanted to own every single step of you buying a house. Let's just walk through a hypothetical. It's 2005. You go to Countrywide for a loan. They say, great, first thing we need is an appraisal on the house to make sure it's worth what you're paying. So who do you think they hire to do the appraisal?
An independent appraiser, I would hope. A neutral third party to keep everyone honest.
You would hope, but no. They hire a company called LandSafe,
And LandSafe is...
a wholly owned subsidiary of Countrywide Financial.
Wait. So the lender owns the appraiser. Isn't that a massive, glaring conflict of interest?
It's huge.
If I'm the lender, my whole business depends on making loans. I want the appraisal to be high so the deal goes through if I control the appraiser.
You see the problem immediately. The checks and balances are just gone. It's a closed loop. If a LandSafe appraiser starts coming in with low-ball appraisals and killing deals, who do you think his boss at Countrywide is going to hear from?
It's not going to go well for him.
Not at all. And it didn't stop there. Okay, we need a credit report. LandSafe pulls the credit report. We need title insurance. LandSafe provides the title services.
So they're literally paying themselves to verify their own deals. It's like a student getting to grade their own exam.
100%. And then once the loan is all signed, they say, great, now you need homeowners insurance. And guess who sells that? A company called Balboa Life and Casualty?
Let me guess. Also owned by Countrywide.
You got it. Another subsidiary. They'd sell you property insurance, casualty insurance. They'd even try to sell you life insurance. Every slice of the pie. If a dollar was changing hands related to that house, they wanted it to end up in a Countrywide pocket.
It's brilliant from a purely cynical business perspective. It's ruthlessly efficient. But it also means you are so exposed if the housing market ever turns.
And we haven't even gotten to the top of the food chain. The final piece of this vertical machine was their own capital markets division.
Okay.
Remember we said they sell those bundles of loans to Wall Street? Well, eventually they just became Wall Street. They set up their own broker-dealer so they could underwrite and trade their own mortgage-backed securities.
Unbelievable. So let's recap the flow. They find the borrower. They originate the loan, their own company appraises the house, their other company insures the house, then they bundle the loan into a security, and then their other company sells that security to investors.
It's a completely self-contained, self-eating financial ecosystem. And this whole factory, this whole machine, was incredibly profitable as long as one simple condition was met.
Volume.
They needed a constant, never-ending river of new borrowers walking in the door to keep the fees flowing and the machine running.
And this is where the story starts to get really dark. Because by, 2004, 2005, the pool of good borrowers was starting to dry up.
It was tapped out.
Everybody with a good credit score, a stable job, 20% for a down payment.
Yeah.
They already had a house. They'd already refinanced.
The low-hanging fruit was gone.
Ugh.
So if you're Angelo Mozilo, and your stock has delivered 23,000%, and Wall Street expects you to keep growing, but you've run out of prime customers, what do?
You lower your standards.
You widen the net. And this is where Countrywide's super aggressive multi-channel strategy came in.
I saw this in the notes. They broke it down into 4 different divisions, and one of them was called Full Spectrum Lending.
Right.
That name sounds so corporate and clean. We serve the full spectrum, like a happy rainbow.
It's one of the great corporate euphemisms of all time. Full spectrum was their internal code for subprime. The source material is very clear. This division focused on customers with less than prime quality credit. This is where they really started pushing the exotic products.
Explain what an exotic product is in the mortgage world. What made these loans so toxic?
We're talking about things like option ARMs, which are adjustable rate mortgages or interest-only loans. But the worst were the negative amortization loans.
Negative amortization.
Imagine taking out a loan where for the first 2 or 3 years, your monthly payment doesn't even cover the full interest that's due.
The unpaid interest just gets tacked onto your loan balance.
Exactly. You make your mortgage payment every month, and at the end of the year, you actually owe more money than when you started.
Your debt is going up even though you're paying the bank.
Yeah.
That seems fundamentally broken.
It's a time bomb. And it's fine maybe if you're a sophisticated real estate flipper who's going to be out of the house in 6 months, but it is an absolute catastrophe if you're a regular working family who just told, don't worry about it, you can just refinance in 2 years when your house is worth more.
And Countrywide was pushing these hard.
Extremely hard. I mean, look at this number. In 2006, 45% of all the loans they made were conventional, non-conforming loans.
Okay, non-conforming. Translate that for us.
Conforming loans are the safe ones. They meet the strict standards set by the government-sponsored entities, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Non-conforming means they were too big or too risky. Basically, they were loans that were too toxic for even the government-backed giants to buy.
So almost half their business in 2006 was stuff that Fannie and Freddie wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole?
Exactly. And because Fannie and Freddie wouldn't buy them, Countrywide had to rely 100% on private investors, Wall Street banks, hedge funds to buy this risky paper. And that's a key point. Because when those private investors got nervous and walked away, Countrywide had no safety net, no plan B.
So we have the machine, we have the risky products. But how do they get so many people to sign on the dotted line for these terrible loans? The research talks about a practice called steering.
This gets to the real ethical rot at the heart of the sales culture. Countrywide eventually had to settle a major lawsuit with the New York Attorney General over this.
Billy, it's Spitzer.
That's the one. The investigation found evidence that Countrywide's loan officers were systematically steering borrowers, specifically Black and Hispanic borrowers, into these high-cost subprime loans, even when those same borrowers actually qualified for cheaper, safer prime loans.
So wait, I walk in the door, I've got a 750 credit score, I qualify for the nice simple 30-year fix at 5%. But the salesperson actively convinces me to take the exploding ARM at 8% instead.
Yes.
Why on earth would they do that?
Simple. The incentives were perverse. The loan officers and brokers were paid much higher commissions, they were called yield spread premiums, for selling the riskier, more expensive loans. The worse the deal was for you, the borrower, the bigger the payday was for them.
That is just... It's pure predatory behavior.
Yeah.
You're taking advantage of people who trust you as an expert and deliberately selling them a product that's bad for them because it's good for you.
That was the accusation, and the evidence was pretty strong. I mean, internal documents showed they were approving loans for families that had as little as $1,000 in disposable income for the whole year.
$1,000? That's not even one emergency. That's a flat tire.
Exactly. They were just trying to get the deal closed, collect the fee, and pass the hot potato up the chain.
And what's so wild is that at the time, there was this whole conflicting narrative around this, right? It wasn't framed as predatory. He was framed as inclusive.
Oh, absolutely. This is the complexity of it. An economist named Stan Liebowitz pointed out that before the whole thing blew up, Fannie Mae actually gave Countrywide awards. They called them a paragon of non-discriminatory lending for using flexible underwriting criteria.
Flexible underwriting, another one of those great euphemisms.
It's a very polite way of saying we ignore the traditional rules about income and credit scores.
Right.
At the time, Angelo Mozilo would go on CNBC, and he was very charismatic, and he would say they were democratizing the American dream. They were helping minorities and working-class families get into homes that the old, stuffy, traditional banks would have turned down. And, you know, on some level they were. But they were doing it by strapping these families to financial time bombs.
It's that classic tension between access and safety. If you take all the guardrails off the highway, sure, more people can get on, but you're going to have a lot more catastrophic crashes.
And the crash was coming. But before we get to the explosion itself, we have to talk about the friends of Angelo. Because while Countrywide was squeezing every last penny out of subprime borrowers, there was a completely different set of rules for the rich and powerful.
The VIP program. This is the part of the story that just makes my blood boil. It's the smoking gun that proves this wasn't just, market excess. This was outright corruption.
It's a stunning contrast. The story was broken by reporters at Condé Nast Portfolio and the Wall Street Journal. They uncovered this internal program for FOAs, Friends of Angelo.
And who was on this friends list?
It was a who's who of Washington, D.C. and the finance world. And this program gave them access to special treatment waived fees, lower interest rates, basically white glove service that no normal person could ever get.
Okay, give us some names.
Senator Christopher Dodd. At the time, he was the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee.
Wait, hold on. The actual chairman of the committee in charge of regulating the entire banking industry was getting a sweetheart mortgage deal from the biggest mortgage lender in the country.
That's correct. Also on the list, Senator Kent Conrad, who is chairman of the Senate Budget Committee. And maybe the most damning of all, James Johnson and Franklin Raines.
Who were they?
They were both former CEOs of Fannie Mae.
Fannie Mae.
The biggest buyer of Countrywide's mortgages, the entity they needed to keep the whole machine running. And here are their former top executives getting millions of dollars in loans on very favorable terms. Franklin Raines alone reportedly got over $3 million in loans through the program.
It just screams payoff. It looks like, hey, you keep the regulations light, you keep buying our risky loans, and we'll take care of your personal finances on the side.
It greased the wheels. It created this cozy relationship at the absolute highest levels of power. And the irony is just, it's suffocating.
Wow.
Because later on, Senator Dodd was one of the key figures proposing the government bailout of the mortgage industry.
The guy writing the bailout bill was a VIP client of the company that needed the bailout.
Yeah.
You can't make this stuff up.
You really can't. He just paints this picture of a system where the rules are for the little people. The smart money knew they were playing a different game. This scandal actually forced James Johnson to resign from Barack Obama's Vice Presidential Search Committee in 2008. It was a huge deal.
So you've got this two-tiered system, predatory lending for the masses at the bottom and crony capitalism for the elites at the top. It's just a perfect storm waiting to break.
And in August of 2007, the storm finally hit.
That was the month the music stopped.
Completely.
Walk us through the mechanics of this, because most people think of the crash as 2008. They think of Lehman Brothers in September. But for Countrywide, the heart attack happened a full year earlier.
Right. Remember that secondary market we talked about? The investors who were buying up all those bundles of risky loans? In August 2007, the market for those non-conforming securities, it just froze solid.
What does froze mean in practical terms?
It means there were zero buyers at any price. Countrywide's traders would call a hedge fund or a big bank and say, hey, we've got a $1 billion package of Alt-A mortgages, you want it? And the line would just go dead. Or they'd get a ridiculous offer, like 50 cents on the dollar.
So Countrywide has already paid out the cash to the homeowners. They're holding all this paper, these IOUs, and they desperately need to sell that paper to get their cash back so they can fund their own operations.
And they can't. It's a classic liquidity crisis. Suddenly, they are stuck holding billions and billions of dollars in toxic assets that are losing value by the hour.
And this is when the panic starts.
The panic starts on August 6th when a smaller competitor, American Home Mortgage, suddenly collapses and files for bankruptcy. And everyone in the market knew they were playing the same game as Countrywide, just on a smaller scale. So all eyes immediately turned to Countrywide.
And they had to file a disclosure with the SEC.
Right. Yes. They had to publicly admit that these market disruptions could seriously harm their financial condition. In the world of banking, admitting you might have a liquidity problem is like yelling fire in a crowded theater. It started a stampede.
And it led to an actual physical bank run. People lining up at their branches.
It did. It wasn't just Wall Street investors. It was regular people who had their life savings in a Countrywide bank savings account. On August 17th, there were lines around the block. Billions of dollars were pulled out. The stock price was in free fall. The cost to insure their debt against default shot up 22% in a single day.
So they were bleeding out fast. What did they do? What were their emergency measures?
They pulled the ripcord on everything they had. They had a massive $11.5 billion credit line with a group of other big banks. They drew down the entire thing in one go.
They maxed out their credit card.
Every last cent. It was a signal to the market that they were hoarding cash, preparing for a siege. And even that wasn't enough. The Federal Reserve had to step in and start emergency lending operations just to calm the markets. And this is when Bank of America first gets involved.
This is August 2007.
Right. Bank of America makes a $2 billion investment in Countrywide. They bought a special kind of preferred stock. At the time, BOFA's CEO, Ken Lewis, he thought he was being the hero, the white knight. He thought he was getting a bargain on a fundamentally great company that was just having a temporary liquidity squeeze.
A $2 billion Band-Aid on a mortal wound. I mean, what a catastrophic miscalculation.
One of the biggest in history. But while all this financial chaos was happening inside Countrywide, things were getting truly bizarre. We have to talk about the Protect Our House campaign.
Oh, this is my favorite detail. It feels like it's ripped from an episode of The Office,
Yeah.
but like a much, much darker version.
It's September 2007. The company is on fire. The stock is collapsing. They're in the middle of laying off 20% of their entire workforce. And what does management decide is the solution?
A loyalty oath.
A loyalty oath. They rolled out this internal PR campaign. They literally asked all remaining employees to sign a pledge to tell the Countrywide story and defend the company from bad press.
And if you signed it, you got, what, a wristband?
I got a bright green rubber wristband that said, "Protect Our House."
And what if you didn't sign it? If you didn't wear the bracelet?
Senior managers reportedly made it very clear that if you weren't wearing the green wristband, you weren't on the team. And if you weren't on the team, they were still laying people off.
Can you imagine the atmosphere in that office? Your friends are getting fired. You know the loans you're processing are garbage. The news is saying your company's going bankrupt, and your boss is making you wear a piece of rubber jewelry to prove you're still loyal.
It's dystopian. It shows a leadership team that was completely, utterly detached from reality. They thought they could fix a solvency crisis with a pep rally.
But, you know, the math always wins in the end. And by December 2007, the game was up.
It was over. That's when Angelo Mozilo made the call to Ken Lewis at Bank of America. And according to Lewis, Mozilo was ready to throw in the towel.
Let's talk about the valuation here. This is the wealth destruction part of the story.
It's breathtaking. Just 1 year earlier, in early 2007, Countrywide's market value was about $24 billion.
Okay.
When Bank of America announced the plan to buy them in January 2008, the price tag was roughly $4 billion.
From $24 billion down to $4 billion, 85% of the value just evaporated.
And it got even worse. Because the deal was an all-stock deal, BOFA was paying with its own shares, and BOFA's stock was also falling because of the crisis. So by the time the deal actually closed in July 2008, the final acquisition price was closer to $2.5 billion.
$2.5 billion to buy the biggest mortgage lender in America. On paper, that sounds like the steal of the century. It's like buying a mansion for the price of a tool shed.
That is exactly what Ken Lewis thought. He famously said, and this quote will haunt him forever, "We weighed the short-term pain versus what we think will be a very good deal." He sent a team of 60 analysts to Countrywide's headquarters to go through their books. They thought they understood the risk.
But they made a fatal mistake. They analyzed the credit risk, the risk that the homeowners would default. They completely and totally underestimated the legal risk.
100%. When you buy a company, you don't just buy its assets and its branch offices. You buy its liabilities. You buy its past sins. Bank of America inherited the legal responsibility for every single fraudulent loan, every predatory practice, every false statement Countrywide had made for the past decade.
And the bill for those sins. Let's start tallying it up. Because Bank of America Home Loans was born, but the ghost of Countrywide haunted them for a very, very long time.
The legal bills were astronomical. Almost immediately, in October of 2008, they had to settle that massive predatory lending lawsuit brought by a bunch of state attorneys general. That settlement alone required them to modify loans worth up to $8.4 billion.
$8.4 billion. Let's just pause on that. They paid $2.5 billion for the entire company, and their first act is to pay an $8.4 billion settlement. They are $6 billion in the hole from day one.
They're already massively underwater, and that was just the appetizer. The main course came in 2014 when Bank of America finally reached a settlement with the U.S. Department of Justice over the sale of all those toxic mortgage-backed securities.
What was the price tag on that one?
Nearly $17 billion.
Yeah.
16.65 to be exact.
17 billion. It's a number so big it's hard to even process.
And a huge percentage of those toxic securities that led to that fine originated at Countrywide. If you add it all up, the purchase price, the dozens of settlements, the legal fees, the loan write-downs, most analysts estimate that the Countrywide acquisition ultimately cost Bank of America more than $50 billion.
$50 billion in losses on a $2.5 billion purchase.
It was a black hole that sucked capital out of Bank of America for years. It destroyed Ken Lewis's career. It permanently damaged their brand. It is the textbook case study in what happens when you let deal fever blind you to the real risks.
And what happened to the men at the top? What about Mozilo? Did he face any real consequences?
Not jail time, no. The SEC did charge him in 2009 with insider trading and securities fraud.
The accusation being what?
The accusation was that he was aggressively selling his own shares of Countrywide stock. He made almost $300 million in profit between 2005 and 2007. At the exact same time, he was publicly telling shareholders that the company was rock solid and the loan portfolio was sound.
So the captain was filling his own lifeboat with gold while telling the passengers the ship was unsinkable.
That's a pretty good analogy. He eventually settled with the SEC. He paid a fine of about $67 million, and he agreed to a lifetime ban from ever being an officer or director of a public company again.
$67 million's a lot of money, but compared to the $300 million he made?
It's a fraction. He never admitted any wrongdoing, and he walked away a very, very wealthy man. Countrywide even paid for his legal defense.
Of course they did. Before we wrap, there's one other little footnote in this story that's worth mentioning. IndyMac.
Ah, yes. Countrywide's evil twin.
IndyMac started as a spinoff from Countrywide, right?
It did, way back in '97. It became its own independent bank, but it had the same DNA, the same aggressive culture, the same focus on those risky Alt A and subprime loans. And in July of 2008, at the exact same moment Bank of America was finalizing the Countrywide deal, IndyMac collapsed.
And that was a very ugly failure.
It was the biggest bank failure in a generation at that point. Federal regulators had to seize it after a massive bank run. You saw those pictures on the news. People lined up for blocks in the hot summer sun in California, desperate to get their life savings out. It was this really visceral, terrifying preview of the wider chaos that was about to hit that fall with Lehman Brothers.
It really proved that the business model itself was fundamentally broken. It wasn't just a few bad managers at Countrywide. The whole philosophy of originate to distribute without any skin in the game was just a suicide pact.
It was a model built entirely on one flawed assumption, that home prices on a national level would never ever go down. Once that one assumption broke, the whole machine went into reverse. And instead of printing money, it started destroying capital at a rate the world had never seen before.
So let's try and synthesize this whole epic story. You have a company that starts small, delivers a 23,000% return, becomes the absolute center of the American housing market, seduces Wall Street, corrupts Washington, and then implodes in the most spectacular fashion imaginable.
And I think the key lesson, if you're trying to make sense of it all, is to look past the complicated acronyms, the MBSs and the CDOs. That's all just noise. The core story is incredibly simple. It's about misaligned incentives.
If you pay a salesman a huge commission to sell a bad product, he's going to sell a lot of that bad product.
And if you pay a CEO in stock options that reward short-term gains, he is going to take massive long-term risks to juice the stock price now. And if you give powerful politicians VIP treatment and special deals, they are probably going to look the other way when it's time to enforce the rules.
It all comes down to the human element. We can talk about risk models and algorithms all day, but this was a story about greed and fear and ambition and who had the power.
And the victims of that were real people. We talk about borrowers and subprime, like they're just abstract data points. But these were families who lost their homes. These were employees who were forced to sign loyalty oaths and then lost their jobs and their careers. These were retirees who had their pension funds invested in Countrywide stock that went to zero.
That's the part that really sticks with me. The friends of Angelo and the executives, they all had a soft landing. But the regular people at the bottom of the pyramid just hit the pavement hard.
Which leaves you with a pretty provocative thought to mull over. We're always told that our financial system is supposed to be this rational, risk-based meritocracy, right? You get a loan based on your credit score. But when you pull back the curtain on a company like Countrywide, you see that the people at the very top, the ones writing the laws and setting the rules, were playing a completely different game with a completely different set of rules.
So when the whole system finally broke, was it really because of lax standards for poor people trying to buy a home? Or was it because the people in the penthouse were too busy enjoying the party to ever check the building's foundation?
I think when you look at the evidence, the answer becomes pretty clear.
So the next time you look at your own mortgage statement, take a second to think about the long, strange journey that piece of paper has taken through the global financial system.
It's never just a piece of paper.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.